This is Erin Davis, and this is my final presentation on HIV. So exactly what is it? HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus, and it occurs when one's immune system is compromised or weakened as an effect of the disease. Something particularly interesting about HIV is that it is a retrovirus, meaning that it enters the host cell and changes the cell's RNA into a proviral DNA replica. The virus targets and destroys cells pertinent to fighting certain infections and leaves one susceptible to other viruses and infections. Antibodies can typically be detected in one's blood within 1 year of exposure, but one can go up to 8 or even 10 years before signs and symptoms may appear. Some of the most common symptoms are fatigue, weight loss, muscle or joint pain, swollen glands, night sweats, and fever. If left untreated, HIV can progress into an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Majority of the time, after AIDS is contracted, people tend to die within 2 years of symptom development. This is primarily due to the fact that there is no cure or vaccine for AIDS. There are 3 stages of HIV, the first being acute HIV infection. In this stage, one typically doesn't know that they have the virus, but they do experience flu-like symptoms. The second stage is clinical latency. In this stage, patients are still able to transmit the disease but are not as contagious as individuals in stage 1. In the final stage, AIDS, there is a rapid increase in the number of serious illnesses one contracts. Statistically speaking, in 2010, 34 million were reported living with HIV, 2.7 million new infections were reported, and 1.9 million deaths occurred. As of 2017, 36.9 million are living with HIV, 1.8 million have new infections, and 940,000 deaths have been reported. There is a decrease in the number of deaths and new infections, but an increase in the number of those living with HIV. So what does this say? This says that there is still room for improvement in an area of HIV education. What would help make a more impactful effect on those individuals that have been infected is more education and outreach programs to those individuals or groups that may be considered more susceptible than others. So who is typically affected? Most times, gay and bisexual men, as well as those in the African American community, are some of the most affected groups. What leads to the gay and bisexual men being one of the most affected groups is the fact that they account for a high percentage of those living with HIV, so the risk of being exposed is relatively high. Another factor that contributes to their high rate of contraction is the fact that they participate in anal intercourse. This is known as one of the riskiest forms of sex and is one of the easiest ways to contract the virus. Now, what leads to African Americans being one of the most affected groups is the fact that there is already a greater number of people living with the virus in this community. And this race tends to date within the same race, which increases the chance of contracting the virus. Another thing that gives this group a higher rate of contraction is the fact that this group has higher rates of STDs than other groups. What leads to these higher rates of STDs is the fear and stigma surrounding discrimination and homophobia. As previously mentioned, there is no cure for the virus HIV, but there is a form of treatment to help manage it. The current form of HIV treatment is called ART, which stands for antiretroviral therapy. In this treatment, each drug works specifically to block the virus in various ways. Usually, there is a combination of 3 drugs from 2 separate classes to avoid the development of a drug-resistant strain of HIV. One crucial 2013 event that proved to be a significant turning point in the war against AIDS was the establishment of PEPFAR. This is the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. PEPFAR is an organization established by George Bush in 2013 as an effort to provide AIDS prevention for everyone. The organization had a goal of treating 2 million individuals, preventing 7 million new infections, and also providing care for 10 million. The establishment of this organization proved to have a tremendous impact on the development of the disease. Back in the early 90s, being diagnosed with AIDS was essentially a death sentence because treatment was extremely expensive and nearly no one could afford it. With PEPFAR, long-term coverage was available for everyone. An important figure in public health that worked to address the AIDS epidemic is Elizabeth Glasser. She was a mother that happened to contract the disease through a blood transfusion during childbirth. Unfortunately, she unknowingly passed the disease to her son through breastfeeding. Glasser contracted the disease in 1981, but did not get diagnosed until 1985. Sadly, 2 years later, Glasser's child lost their fight to the disease. This caused Elizabeth and 2 other mothers to come together and fight for the prevention of childhood AIDS. Since the organization's establishment, it has been reported that there was a 95% decline in new pediatric HIV infections in the US and nearly a 60% decline in the number of new infections of children worldwide. Here's a short clip by Tyler Curry discussing what life is like with HIV, and in this video he's comparing then and now. The title of this is The Face of HIV/AIDS Then and Now.
Ever get the feeling that at some point in time there was someone who looked just like you, but was born at a different time? My name is Tyler Curry. I am a writer and a photographer, and I live in Dallas, Texas. I was born in September 1983, 1 month before the HIV virus was identified. At that time, the disease was known as some kind of gay cancer. That was an almost certain death sentence. But there were some who survived. They were called the lucky ones. I was diagnosed with HIV in July of 2012. I had only had the virus for about 9 months, and I was 75 T-cell counts away from an AIDS diagnosis. My biggest concern was dating, premature aging, finding someone to love, and more importantly, finding someone to have sex with. A luxury. Because the man who walked like me and talked like me, who liked the same things that I liked, who made the same mistakes I made, he didn't make it. This would have been the first mark that I found, Kaposi sarcoma. Then there was no HIV test. So often this was the first time you knew that you were infected. 6 months to a year later and things are only getting worse. Everything hurts. My lungs feel like they're on fire. I always have a fever and I have no energy. People would be afraid to touch me. Friends would leave me, too depressed by looking at my face. Half of my friends would be dead. Around my 31st birthday, I probably would have died. My face would no longer be my face. It would be a symbol of a plague. If you're a gay man who's alive and well today, be happy, be thankful, go and live your life. This is not my face. Because I was born in 1983. I'm gonna go wash this off and go and live my life. Turns out I am one of the lucky ones.
I selected this video because I wanted a first-person perspective of what it's like on a day-to-day basis of living with AIDS and how it feels to be constantly judged and ostracized in society. I also selected this video because it puts an emphasis on not letting HIV ruin your life and dictate your decisions and choices. It also shows that those with HIV are still people and shouldn't be ostracized just because of their condition. And these are my references.